Well, good evening. Hope you all are having a good weekend. Start of the weekend here. Clear skies here in our part of Texas, but this is going to be the last day probably. It looks like this because we're heading into an active weather pattern. And you saw in that last clip I mentioned how those towers that were coming by were kind of leaning backwards. You can see it on these soundings here. This is the Fort Worth sounding. Showing a little bit of very weak winds, just above 15,000 feet. Actually, just above 13,000 feet. But below that, we've got maybe 20-25 knots up at about 5,000. It's a very weak low-level jet. That's the fetch of tropical moisture coming north across Texas. And since it's stronger in the lower levels compared to the upper levels, we see the cumulus get kind of a sheared appearance, like what you saw there. So yeah, things are getting active. You wouldn't know it looking at the Texas map. Still showing that southerly gradient here with southeast winds. And highs are fairly mild, looking at upper 80s. And a few lower 90s in the San Antonio area. Give me a second. I'm going to get a bit of water here. So we should take a look at the big picture. Looking at the polar orbiter data. So this is looking from about 100 miles up. Looking at some images that are kind of stitched together. And we see a very strong frontal system going through the Rockies right now. And there's one close on its heels in the Pacific Northwest. If we put on the state outlines, you can see it makes a little more sense there. So we'll zoom in and take a closer look here. And we can see some patterns that we're kind of familiar with on the Great Plains. We can see a clear slot and enough instability and moisture in that clear slot to generate a few strong storms here in northeastern Utah. And then we got this deformation zone back here. This is the wraparound around the Utah City area, Great Salt Lake. Might as well take a closer look at those storms. They look pretty neat. They're a little bit blurred here since they're very close to the edge, but we can just switch over to one of the other satellites, and yeah, that looks pretty good there. Probably some beautiful towers if you're out driving around whatever towns there are out there. I've never really been in that part of Utah. But yeah, you can see that very strong cold front pushing through Colorado. This is stronger than what they usually look like when they come through. And let's take a look at that thickness chart, pressure and thickness. We've been looking at this the past few days, and I've showed you that the red lines and the blue lines, those indicate 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. So this is the lower half of the troposphere. You can see some very tight gradients right here in Colorado. So that's indicating the cold front starting to emerge from the Rockies. And then the warm frontal segment is up here around the South Dakota, southern Minnesota area. And then the cold core, you can see that outlined back here. The core is right over Salt Lake City. Let's take a look at some METAR observations for Salt Lake City. See what kind of conditions we have in that cold core low. METAR NOAA. The Aviation Weather Center has a good system here for looking at METARs and TAFs, which are the forecast versions. And you can go back 36 hours with these. So let me put in Salt Lake City here. We'll go back maybe 12 hours and just look at it raw. And the trend that we see here goes upward with time. So the most recent obs are at the top as you go up. So we see a lot of rain here, a lot of rain groups all the way back to noon. And we see a lot of good visibility since we're back behind the cold front in the more unstable air. And we see a kind of a persistent north to northwest wind here. And there's some evidence of some CBs in here, because we're seeing these bases down around 3,000 or 4,000 feet. Okay, yeah, so that's Salt Lake City there. Let me take a quick look at Hill Air Force Base up in Ogden. See if there's any more remarks. Not really. So just kind of a rainy, dreary day there in the Salt Lake City area. So now you know where the fronts are. Let's see what the Canadians think about this. This is the Canadian Meteorological Center analysis. They've got a website right here. You can put that into Google, just Canada analysis. And you'll get a map kind of like this. And it looks like they missed that tail end of the front. But, you know, it's definitely there. And you can see that system behind it coming on shore. Looks like we accidentally picked up a chart for last night. Let me run this back to their chart, to their website. I'm going to put an 18 here. Yeah, that looks better. This is 18Z, so this is 1 p.m. And now we can see that front about what we would expect. We saw that on the thickness chart. And here's the other one coming onto the Washington coast. And really the only big cold air mass is this big high over Ontario, covering this area here, and a large Pacific high off the California coast. All right, let's see. I'm trying to think what we're going to look at next. Yeah, let's go ahead and go into the models. Okay, yeah, and the first thing I'll do is position this where you can kind of get a good look at that. So this is starting out right now. So here you can see that frontal system coming through Colorado. And yeah, there was one more thing I was going to show you here. The wind flow. See that? All that convergence there along the high plains in front of the Front Range. Very convergent pattern. You can kind of trace out where the front is in Mexico there. And here comes the other system onshore in Washington. And here's something that's pretty neat. This is the surface observations. You can see that downslope here around Pueblo. Got 85 degrees there with a west wind gusting to 28. But you go inland a little bit into the mountains, we drop off to 60s and 50s, and even some 40s. So it looks pretty clear-cut where the front is, probably somewhere in here, but eventually you're going to get to a point where you're kind of mixed up with stations at higher elevations, and that can make it kind of difficult to find where the fronts are. They don't show up very well like they do here. So one trick you can use, and really I've only seen this in digital atmosphere, haven't seen too many websites that have this, but that's going to be your analysis of potential temperature. It's off the screen there. So potential temperature, I think all my windows are kind of covered up here, but hopefully you saw that. And let's plot that real quick. And there you can use those gradients to kind of get an idea where your front is. So that can help you out when it's kind of difficult to find when you're starting to lose track of where the front is. So maybe I'd take that a little bit further south like that. So basically from west of Clayton to about Deming, New Mexico. So all this is going to be post-frontal air here. And you can see that this air mass is very Pacific in origin. You go all the way to Las Vegas, Nevada. And they've got 79 degrees there. They are getting a little bit of downslope from the higher Nevada terrain here. Temperatures are a little bit on the cool side out there, so it is definitely a Pacific system coming in. And then we've got that other shot working onto the coast here. We probably wouldn't know it unless we had seen the thickness data in the satellite picture. So we'll go back to our maps here. Okay, let's run this forward and see what happens to that front. Things are going to get very busy this weekend, because now you can see the front is emerging into the central plains, into Oklahoma and West Texas on Saturday night into Sunday. So we're probably going to see some thunderstorm activity, maybe from northern Missouri into Oklahoma on Saturday night. This kind of feels a little bit late to me. I wouldn't be surprised if this stuff ends up on the plains a little earlier. But this is what it's going for, and then Sunday it brings it into Texas proper, and I think this is where we're going to see a squall line probably. Maybe, looks like our wind shift is right there, so that's going to be Sunday night. Then we can see a little bit of cold air barging in, pressures go up to 1024 millibars, and looks like a little bit of overrunning hanging back along the tail end of that boundary in West Texas. Then not a whole lot happens, but look out in the Gulf. Here comes something very interesting. Looks like we got ourselves a little hurricane here. This is October 2nd, 192 hours out. And now it's coming into the Gulf of Mexico, October 4th through 5th, 288 hours out. Look at that there. This is almost like Hurricane Ike Part 2. That's pretty serious there. But we are 360 hours out, so if you want to have some fun, put this on your calendar. October 8th, hurricane on the Texas coast near Beaumont or Lake Charles. And I guarantee you it's going to be off, maybe by quite a bit. But one thing I will show you, the models are kind of signaling something's going to happen in the Gulf, possibly. These are different iterations of the GFS model. And we get a couple different solutions, like this one has a hurricane in Louisiana. This one has nothing in the Gulf. This one has nothing. And we have this other one, has a hurricane coming into around Veracruz, Mexico, coming on the Mexican coast. Pretty good hurricane there. Then we got this other solution here with a hurricane and another one down here at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. That one's more on Florida, so it's pointing to something in the Gulf for around October 5th through 8th. We'll have to keep an eye on that for sure. I try to look at the ECMWF. They don't release any of their model data past 240 hours, so you've got to be a registered user and be abiding by the EU protocols they have for the CMWF Center, and it's a bunch of crap, really. So I'm kind of glad what we have here in the U.S. All this stuff is freely available, and if you ask me, I think that makes the scientific climate here a little bit healthier. You get a lot more kids and younger people interested in meteorology, and it's kind of a symbiotic thing here. So there's probably what's going to be heading into the Caribbean. And SPC is forecasting that, making a beeline for that area. So anything in the Caribbean is going to be, that's probably going to have a potential to reach the Gulf of Mexico. So yeah, we're going to have to keep an eye on this for sure. And before I forget, one little thing. And this is just another quick geography lesson because, like I say, I think you have to have a really sharp knowledge of geography to really be good at forecasting. So for this, I better turn this down, right? For this segment, I'm going to take you down into Colorado because that's where we have a front moving through. Moving through the passes there on the Front Range, and I'll show you this one mountain range right here. This is the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. It goes from just south of Colorado Springs, just south of Pikes Peak, all the way down to Santa Fe. So there's Colorado Springs up there, and all the way down here, this is the Santa Fe area. So this is a very important Rocky Mountain range. We tend to get a lot of orographic effects. It generates a lot of clear air turbulence when we get strong perpendicular flow across it. And we do get some lee side troughing out in this area here. Get a lot of cyclogenesis out there when we have strong flow coming out of the Central Rockies. And it's a very picturesque area, and maybe I can pull up a few photos. No, I don't want to see hotels, but you really get kind of a mixed bag here on Panoramio. But let me just get one shot with the mountains. I've lost patience with that, so we'll get you one photo here. Well, how about a lake? We'll settle for that. So can't seem to move this. There we go. So that's pretty scenic there. And there's one really neat spot that you should go to if you're ever in that part of Colorado. That's the Great Sand Dunes Park. They've got actual like Sahara sand dunes out there, easily 100 feet high, and you're free to climb on them and slide down them, and it's a whole lot of fun. I definitely recommend that. But don't go in the wintertime. Alamosa, you see Alamosa's down here. They're all often showing as the coldest temperature in the lower 48 in the wintertime, sometimes even in the summer. So you're going to be freezing if you head to that area in the wintertime. And guys, I think I'm about done here. I appreciate you watching. I'll check over on chat, and looks good. I say hello to everybody. Yeah, Vernal, Utah. That's the one I was thinking of for sure. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be Saturday. We're getting into an active weather pattern. I did want to say thank you to Suzanne Meissner for a $20 donation to our video card fund. So I'm trying to get 3 monitors hooked up here so I can really handle. I've got like this solitaire thing going on with all my windows. I've got like a window open for YouTube, another for Google Earth, one for Voicemeeter, another for OBS, the broadcaster, then the browser, then Digital Atmosphere. It's really a mess, so that'll make it a lot easier. I'm trying to do astronomy. There's really no astronomy news. We had a last quarter moon this morning, and that's about it. So I appreciate you watching. We'll see you at the same time tomorrow night, and have a good evening.